Hi, welcome to another episode of the JetRails podcast and a video brought to you today by the teams at JetRails and Collins Harper. We've got Alex Povolotski here with us from the Collins Harper team, as well
Hello.
as Tom and Robert here at JetRails. Alex, you want to give a little background on yourself and your team?
Most definitely. So Alex Povolotski with Collins Harper Software. We're big partners with JetRails and Magento. We build all sorts of interesting and exciting stuff on Magento platform, Magento 1, Magento 2, specifically payment extensions for big payment acquirers and banks, shipping extensions for everybody who is in shipping under the sun, building sites as well, and everything between. So that's the experience I got. My team is full of qualified and certified Magento developers, and we've been in business since 2007.
And Tom, a quick introduction.
Sure. This is Tom Puchalski here with JetRails. We provide managed hosting solutions for mission critical operations like Magento. And I'm basically here to help assist with communication with development agencies, clients, the end users, to make sure they have the support that they need for success.
And I'm Robert. I oversee partnerships and alliances at JetRails and am a Magento 1 and 2 certified solution specialist with experience helping to run a Magento partner agency as well, and many years of experience in pitching and launching and helping to manage and optimize Magento sites. So today's topic is going to be about the progression of Magento 2 from the original planning stages up through where we're at today. It's very easy to get lost in sort of what's rolled out in Magento 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, now 2.3. So we'll be trying to bring you some of those insights that have come along the way that make Magento 2 the powerful platform that it is today. I think it would be great for us to start off maybe talking a little bit about some of that history. And Alex, you're in the industry long enough to remember when Magento 2 was still on the drawing board. Any thoughts to open us up on that?
Well, Magento has expanded significantly since the days of Magento 1 being a collaborative open source project, pretty much with everybody chipping in, into that formed into Magento 2, which is a completely different platform. It's the same as comparing DOS and Windows XP, I shall say. And with Magento 2 came in more stringent controls on the extensions and third-party plugins. Magento has created its own marketplace, which is very similar to an app store, where a developer submitting a third-party application has to abide by certain guidelines and rules and strict regulations and checks and balances before it gets published onto the marketplace. And it is a one point where people would go for trusted applications and third-party extensions for the Magento. And as you know, Magento is used by the largest enterprise clients and mid-level and small clients too, but it can support the large enterprise solutions for complex products, huge product databases, and many online merchants, e-commerce merchants, found themselves to be very successful on Magento platform.
Yeah, and I remember the roll-up. We heard about Magento 2 for a good long while before it finally got released. It wasn't necessarily the easiest release. I think it probably still could have been considered in beta. So there was a bit of a roadmap there that meandered a bit when they launched. That had to be around November 2015. But the marketplace, I think, is one of the best things that came out of it, being able to look at extensions that have undergone at least some level of code review. I know that our team here at JetRails, is providing some free extensions. We've got one up there already for two-factor authentication. We've got some others that we've been sharing with the community that we're planning to submit as well, like our Cloudflare extension that helps folks manage Cloudflare right from the Magento admin. And the experience with that, having people download something that they can feel more confident in versus the old Magento Connect, that's definitely a big plus. So when would you say that your first experience was with a Magento 2 site? Obviously, early days, there were a lot of kinks to be worked out.
Indeed, it started very early in, late 2015, early 2016 when it rolled out. There were a lot of stability issues. Since then, it has improved. Magento has improved significantly. Right now, the version is 2.3, if I'm not mistaken. So they have taken strides. Since 2015, 2016, Magento 2 has become a definitely more stable product. And now we have a recent development with Adobe. Everybody knows Adobe from their ventures into PDF and Photoshops and other their products. So they have acquired Magento. And I believe that under their corporate control and stewardship, Magento will become a more structured and streamlined organization with many more products for e-commerce to come and many more integrations.
Yeah, it is definitely interesting. Tom, you have some thoughts on that?
No, I just wanted to point out that from my experience and all the feedback that I'm getting from the different development teams, from the end user, it's all about making the experience better, and all the feedback, at least that I'm given, it's positive. The development process is a lot more streamlined. It's easier. Store owners are having an easier time managing everything that they have in the back end. But most importantly, all these new tools that Magento 2 has put forth and bringing into the equation, it's making the web visitor experience much better. And that's what it's all about, is making sure that web visitor has a better time with the checkout process, an easier time shopping, and it's just simply put, just a better experience.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree. I think that the Adobe acquisition certainly came well after the release of Magento 2, so it's something that they've adopted, but they're really doing their best to walk the walk and talk the talk when it comes to open source so far. There's a lot of eyes on them for that, but they seem to be doubling down on that, and we're glad to see it. They are releasing their new Adobe Commerce Cloud and such, really, upmarket for Fortune 500s and large companies that they want some of those extra Adobe products bundled in. And so that's certainly really interesting, and certainly helps to show off the power of what you can do with Magento paired with other systems. And I think that we're all very confident that Magento is here for many, many years to come. And so with that, let's talk about where it started back in November 2015, some of the original selling points over Magento 1, aside from being built on a more modern stack. Alex, I know that you've worked with lots of checkout integrations and such. Obviously, Magento 2, right off the shelf, offered a better checkout experience. How have you seen some of that come together, and some of the value brought just in improvement to that shopping cart and checkout flow?
Well, the checkout flow is more streamlined. There is a lot of potential for integration with taxation, coupons, discounts, and multitude of payment methods, third party or otherwise. It has standardized the flow and the checkout flow, released the API for integration, which has generated a lot of interest from a bunch of our clients, Visa, CyberSource, Authorize.net, Stripe, that immediately wanted to connect and release their products onto Magento Marketplace, respectively, to grab the clients and facilitate their experience with Magento. So it is a more streamlined process that is more secure. With the release of version 2.3, Now a lot of PCI compliance came into play in terms of checkout and payment specifically. It is a significantly more secure solution. On that very note, I never forget to mention that Magento plans to deprecate, meaning kill, Magento 1 at some point in the future, and will stop supporting it. So therefore, whoever is sitting on Magento 1 still and is thinking of migrating to Magento 2, now is the time before the rush happens. The consequence of not migrating to Magento 2 would be the cessation of support for Magento 1 and potential openings for vulnerabilities, for exploits. So it is a great idea to start thinking about migrating to Magento 2.3 or whatever future version will come out sooner rather than later, just because of these security updates alone.
Yeah. So give or take, I believe that end of life, that deprecation for Magento 1 is coming in June of 2020. So I'd say around 4 or 5 years after the launch of Magento 2. So not a bad run to give people a chance to get their money's worth out of Magento 1. But technology doesn't stop evolving. So the internet that many years ago versus today, a lot of new updates. And I think we're going to see some of that as we talk a little bit more about some of these releases along the way. So Magento 2 definitely cut down on the checkout process so that there'd be fewer steps. Something that I saw a lot of folks buying extensions for Magento 1, buying one-step checkout extensions where they may not have necessarily needed that in M2. And I think personally that was a big benefit because in M1, the one-step checkouts were one of the most common extensions to cause conflicts because anything else that you were going to add to the checkout wasn't necessarily going to play well with that one-step checkout. Extensions were going to expect a native checkout. So as you were adding things that had to do with payments and shipping and customer attributes and all sorts of other features, order attributes, there were often issues, but certainly lots of little nuance that came along there, even allowing customers to register for an account on the thank you page or having customers recognized if they had an existing email address so that instead of shopping as a guest, they would be reminded to log in. And I'd say also, though, I wouldn't neglect to talk about some of the server side improvements and optimizations. Tom, would you be able to speak a little bit to some of the caching and overall improvements from the hosting side of things?
Sure. With Magento 2, you pretty much have Varnish built in out the box, but one of that makes everybody's life just a lot easier. Some of the things that I've noticed though with that is there's a certain level of comfort that needs to be there still when working with Varnish. One of the things that I've heard about historically with Magento 1 is, hey, I've got Varnish set up, but it's not working. Or it doesn't seem like the site's performing any better than it has, prior to this. And what I would want to mention is that, we've seen that, I guess, how can I say this? The measurement of cache miss or cache hit rates play a factor. So I would say using tools like Varnish Stat to spot check to make sure Varnish is working properly. But out the box with Magento 2, Varnish is there.
Excellent. And I think we can look at the cadence of updates that have been coming out. And so about a year after Magento 2 originally released, we got to 2.1, which I would call the stability release. It wasn't necessarily adding a ton of new features at that point. It was really clearing out the bugs of the original release and getting Magento 2 to a much more stable place where it could be used as more of a mainstream platform and not an early adopter platform. Alex, would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Stability in the very beginning of Magento's 2 release was an issue. Now it's not so anymore. It is a relatively stable platform with plenty of customization options that everybody is after. Now, I see sometimes that clients, in their effort to customize Magento to their liking, do break things, but it is not Magento's fault. It is through the effort of deep customization and breaking the flow sometimes. But it is a much cleaner process, both from the front end and back end development perspectives, both for the merchant controlling the flow and the products and monitoring the sales and controlling the sale process, as well as for the end customer who is presented with the checkout flow. It is a much cleaner solution compared to Magento 1.
And, and I think that brings us to Magento 2.2. So we saw 2.0 in 2015, 2.1 in 2016, 2017 brought us 2.2. Certainly minor releases in between. But when we got to 2.2, one of the things I found most interesting was the release of Magento's B2B features for the Magento commerce users on the enterprise side. I've worked on many B2B sites through the years, and so I thought it was about time that Magento started to get some of that into the core. I know that was really a community effort, and they wound up adding in things that had to do with quick ordering and quotes, as opposed to adding to cart and checking out at an exact amount, requesting a quote from the seller so that you could negotiate rates on things, requisition lists and company accounts. A lot of features that I think you could really achieve pretty well with Magento extensions today off the shelf. And also, in some cases, features that you're probably going to customize a bit around your organization regardless. Things like, quotes and such that, one company might handle a little bit differently than another. But certainly nice to see that for some of those larger B2B merchants, that Magento was doing their part to be competitive in the market. Alex, have you run into folks starting to use some of those features? I know that they're still a bit young, but they've now been out for I guess over a year.
Definitely I heard about the B2B functionality and the quotation functionality. Not in my experience, but I know I wanted to segue you starting talking about Magento 2 and 2.2 specifically. I wanted to involve Tom in raising up an issue of proper environment for hosting between Magento 1 and Magento 2. There are quite significant differences since the introduction of Magento 2 on the PHP requirements and hosting requirements. They are very much different. Is it so, Tom?
Absolutely. With the evolution of technology and the way things are happening at such a rapid pace, with Magento 2, you're going to be taking advantage of using PHP 7. You're going to have a more stable environment, a lot more efficient. There's a lot more security and a lot more optimization. So yes, the environments are definitely different.
I'd say there's also some security improvements, even pushing files away from the root directory into safer directories and such. That the overall architecture, in some ways, from a hosting perspective, got improved. Aside from the addition of things like Varnish as a more off-the-shelf integration. So
Sure.
Definitely, if you try to simply just load up M2 in your existing M1 account, you're probably missing things like Composer and things that you're going to need and want in order to successfully host an M2 site. I always recommend starting with a fresh account. It's an M1 site. You're probably looking at a hosting account that's chock full of years of, I don't know, let's just say remnants of things. So best to start somewhere clean, apply the right security protocols, apply the right optimizations for speed and otherwise. But absolutely, sort of, there's similarity between the two, but they are two different beasts.
Indeed,
Yeah,
I would
plus,
agree with Rob about that. And we're working with a couple of clients whom we migrate from Magento 1 to Magento 2. All we take is, maybe CSS styling and the database and certain rules, but we start from a fresh account and we build it from scratch. And that's an important thing to mention as well, that migrating to Magento 2 is pretty much the same as building a new site. I mean, we take some of the things from Magento, the database, some rules, but all the extensions, all the third party must be new, specifically built for Magento 2. A lot of the companies that were on Magento 1 are building or have already built a Magento 2 extension. But this transition it takes time. It takes 3 to 6 months to do, and it is very similar to building a completely new site. And some clients realize that and take this opportunity to refresh at the same time as their move from Magento 1 to Magento 2.
and the key word that you said there was clients, and that's a very, very important word in my vocabulary. And to make things as easy as humanly possible is always the goal. And with Magento 1, we're always focusing on security. How can we protect the client? And you'd be surprised with, we put out a two-factor authenticator out there. We can call our clients all day long, and it surprises me. There's always a little bit of resistance to bringing that technology in to help protect them. I don't know why. I mean, it's there. It's there for them to make sure that their site is protected as humanly possible. But there's a lot of pushback. Now with Magento 2, you've got the 2FA built in already, so hopefully that streamlines the process and allows them to take advantage of it without putting that extra extension in. So security is a little bit better.
And when 2.2 came around, there were some other nice things that rolled out with it, and so I think that's around the time that it got renamed from Magento Community Edition and Enterprise Edition over to Open Source and Commerce. So same concept, but rebranding of the names of the versions. But that's around the time that they released some of the advanced reporting. They had acquired RJ Metrics, so they added some nicer reporting tools. They added some of the social commerce capabilities, being able to replicate a Facebook store. They started to bundle in more apps into the core, so to speak. So systems like Signified would be available off the shelf. You wouldn't necessarily need to add another extension for that. So we saw more of that happening, and that sort of brings us toward Magento 2.3, which released at the end of 2018. So it's the most recent. The latest version, 2.3.1, came out just this last month in March of 2019. Why don't we shift over to that for a couple of minutes? And Alex, any favorites that you've run into out of this newest variation of Magento? And do you see, I guess a loaded question, do you see it as just an incremental update or something maybe a bit more?
No, 2.3 is a more than incremental upgrade. 2.3 was a major upgrade for Magento. They changed up a few of the security requirements and some flows, which broke some things and required third-party extension providers to review the compatibility of their specific extensions with Magento 2.3. So for example, if their extension was built for 2.1 and 2.2 and was working fine, with the release of 2.3, some of them would not work from the payments perspective or shipping or etc. Simply because of the added security and the additional functionality that needed to be there, some additional fields that needed to be parsed. So everybody scrambled to make it compatible with 2.3. So a lot of rework went into this. So it was a major release, I shall say, and we felt it as well with our clients. that required work and rework of some of the extensions to be compatible with 2.3 as well. I have seen on my end a lot of clients that use these third-party extensions that we built specifically that already upgraded to 2.3. So they were asking, are you compatible with 2.3? Are you compatible with 2.3? So we took proactive approach when we heard about the release to work with Magento and implement the necessary changes in order for the extensions to be compatible with 2.3. So before upgrading to the late, it's always good to upgrade to 2.3 because the 2.3 upgrade handled a lot of potential issues and vulnerabilities from security perspective and payments specifically. But before an upgrade, it's good to check and see on a fresh install of Magento to test all the extensions that are currently on the site that the client is using to see that everything works smoothly rather than upgrading their live site right away.
Makes sense to me. And talking about 2.3, I think, that there are some releases around multi-source inventory, which certainly was a community effort, not necessarily a complete redo of Magento's inventory system, but some additions there for those that have products stored in different retail locations or in different warehouses, and some benefit to having some of that functionality off the shelf. I think it'll continue to evolve a bit more, but that was an interesting one. I think the biggest one from my perspective did relate to PWA, to progressive web apps, and really a rethinking of the Magento front end. So we can even anticipate that at some point Magento will deprecate use of some of the technology that powered the earlier themes for Magento 2, like specifically Knockout JS, that flavor of JavaScript. But I'm really impressed by it, and that it's the future of progressive web apps and their ability to have sites load quickly and more seamlessly. The addition of some of the new APIs, GraphQL, things to allow Magento to interact in a more headless fashion, and to allow more customization, more flexibility. It really, to me, 2.3 could have been in some ways 3.0. I don't think that Magento is going to abandon the 2 family anytime soon. They're still trying to get a lot of folks to upgrade from 1. But definitely some major improvements. Tom, have you run into anything interesting out of 2.3?
Well, the Elasticsearch is now available for open source users. So, whereas previously it was only available with a paid commerce license. So that's another feature that is just making the buyer journey that much better. And I'm glad that that is built in right now.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned earlier two-factor authentication. I think it's with 2.3 that Magento added that in off the shelf, and so that's great. I know that they've added some other Google reCAPTCHA tech off the shelf that a lot of folks in the community were using. So a lot of good stuff there. As things have been progressing with 2.3.1, some of the new 2.3 features are coming alive, like the new page builder. And so that's pretty cool. A lot more user friendly in terms of managing CMS pages and such. Well, above and beyond anything old WYSIWYG editors did. And they've also begun to put out some of the Magento sales and advertising channels, helping to create some deeper connections with Google Merchant Center, with Amazon. They've got Magento payments in early access. That's another one where they began to pull in something a little bit more directly between PayPal and Braintree and Signified. Still yet to see exactly how that'll go. I know that for companies that have been Magento partners in payments and credit card fraud and for years and have been supportive of the community, maybe butts up against them a little bit and not ideal, but might help some merchants pull together resources more quickly and easily as they're launching sites and such. Fewer phone calls and vendors to manage as they're getting these sites up and running. So some interesting things there. And, along the way, I mentioned Signified earlier. There have been additional core bundled extensions from companies like Klarna and Vertex and .mail or now .digital. So definitely interesting that perhaps folks need fewer extensions than they did before, given that some of these things are off the shelf, and hopefully better maintained and supported as they're just upgrading their Magento instance and patching their Magento instance, as opposed to dealing with them as completely separate extensions in all cases. So definitely a lot going on there in 2.3. And I think it's interesting. So, I've hit on the fact that they've been doing these annual releases, and so I think it's fair to guess that there'll be a 2.4 coming out next year, or perhaps before the end of this year. I should say it is 2019. But there are also end-of-life dates coming for some of those early versions of 2 that we've got. 2.0 is already end-of-life. They're not putting out updates anymore to that family that, really people.
And I resonate that with you that the 2.3 could have been named 3.0.
Yeah.
But because there are a lot of people still sitting on Magento 1, they're probably going to carry on with the 2 denominator.
Yeah, I think when 2 launched, there were enough issues with it, and I remember that there was a huge number of issues, reported through GitHub and such. They had a big backlog, that it was not their finest hour in terms of PR. That they definitely, and I think that while there has been change in the Magento team and evolution, including between, being sold by one company, bought by another, that changes in management, et cetera, that I think that there's so many folks there that have been there for so many years and that took a major lesson from the experience, and that really do care about merchants and that want to support them in an environment where they're not going to be asked to re-platform anytime soon, where they're not going to be asked to make that bigger reinvestment, that there will be changes. For instance, I remember when merchants had to go from, from a standard web page to recreating their themes to be mobile friendly using, Bootstrap or other frameworks in order to be responsive. And so, PWA may just be the next instance of that. That comes along where, yes, there's going to be some work to do if you want to take advantage of the newest technology. But often that comes with a return on investment. And that's something that, regardless of what platform you'd be on, that you'd want to take advantage of some of this new tech, especially if you're doing a certain volume.
Definitely. It definitely pays. It pays off. And, to your point, I think with the 2.0, it did them a disfavor, so to speak, to Magento, and that's why so many people are still on Magento 1, because they had this experience of the read rumors and had stories about 2.0. Definitely the latest 2.3 is nothing near what was back in 2015, 2016. So therefore, again, with the deprecation soon of Magento 1, everybody should start thinking and budgeting it now, the migration to M.2.
Yeah, and look, for those that are already on M2 or that are considering which version of M2 to build on, so 2.0 is already deprecated. 2.1 is going to go end of life in June 2019. And then 2.2 in December of 2019. So both of those are going to sunset this year. So those are coming up. I know not everyone is as aware. So that's really a big deal in the community, to get the word out there that folks should be upgrading. There is a natural upgrade path between these versions of Magento 2. It does take a little bit of elbow grease. And Alex, as you were talking about, there may be some extension issues and other things to be worked through. So definitely something.
Oh, yes.
I mean, all updates and upgrades should be happening in a sandbox of some sort, in essence, in a staging or development site before being pushed to live, and should go through thorough user acceptance testing.
Oh yes, our QA people with our clients are very, very busy. So migrating even from 2.2 to 2.3, that's not a minor upgrade, that's major. And on average, enterprise level e-commerce sites, we see 60, 70 extensions utilized on them. So imagine 10 or 15% of those extensions not working properly on 2.3. that's a big number. So what to do? Get support from those third-party extensions, do some development internally to make them compatible. So there is work and time and some budget that is involved with that. So merchants should really, really, really start thinking it before and not delay it before the end of the year.
Yeah, and there's good reason for that Magento 2.2 end of life coming at the end of this year. It coincides with the end of life of PHP 7.1, and so you really want to be on PHP 7.2 in order to get security updates in your hosting stack and your hosting layer, and so that's really important, and that's part of why Magento place that end of life where they did. They don't want to recommend that merchants stay in a version of Magento where they're going to be much more likely to have security holes in their hosting layer. So I think they're definitely pushing people in the right direction and making some good decisions there. So aside from getting new features, you're getting better security. And we just saw last week Magento put out 2.3.1 alongside of the new versions of 2.2 and 2.1, which are still supported, and they are still putting out patches and updates for, as well as patches and updates for Magento 1. They put out 1.9.4.1, so it certainly is interesting to see that if you want to stay at the cutting edge, that also means that you have to have certain budget in place to maintain and to optimize. So. Certainly important, regardless of where you go in Magento. You're going to have some maintenance to be done. But if I were building today, I'd absolutely be looking at 2.3.1 in terms of best investment.
Oh, no, definitely. It's a cost of running a business. It's the same as if you're in a retail location, you invest in better windows, better lighting, better doors, better locks for security, better cameras. Same for e-commerce store. You have to invest in this. And with the new PHP requirement of 7.2 comes potentially database issues as well. So lots and lots of testing required again. So it's a cost of doing business. The upgrades are needed, and there is a cost attached to it. But this is shouldn't be a surprise.
And I'll ask both of you: are there any situations today where you would recommend an earlier version of Magento, whether 2.2 or 1.9.4.1 or something else in the Magento family, other than the latest, other than 2.3.1, for any particular reason?
So if there is a preference for one versus another?
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are some folks out there that
I'll tell you, yes.
that there's OpenMage, for instance, where there are a few developers that are contributing a bit to, as I would describe it, to fork off of Magento 1 and be able to have some maintenance in there once Magento stops providing patches officially. I mean, a lot of the patches and updates, they are coming one way or another with some involvement from the community. From my perspective, I'd be afraid of relying on that.
So I'll tell you, the question is very clear. We have a lot of clients who sit on Magento 1 and they want to drag it out for as long as possible. The reason is twofold: business and technical. Business, they invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, larger companies, millions, into the development of the site, making it work with everything, all the customizations and extensions that they put in there, and it just works. So any movement from there will require further development, budget, and so on and so forth. So they are trying to get the maximum return on the investment before it is deprecated. So that's a business decision. Technical, because everything works, and if they need to change, they change a lot. They need to change everything. It's like building a new site, so it's a big investment, as well as the technical probability of something not working exactly as it was before. So there is a technical burden to it. So they try to drag it out as well for that reason. So there is business and technical motivation from the merchant's perspective to stick around and sit on Magento 1. In terms of your second part of question, that even after deprecation, there will be a community group supporting it, no doubt, yes. Just like, with any other open source developments, take Linux, for example, there's always a group of dedicated developers, not dedicated, but, volunteers, pretty much, volunteers who are interested in putting this out there. Would you put your multi-million-dollar business and rely on some random volunteers from the street updating and keeping up the system and with all the latest security patches and updates? Or would you rather migrate? Yes, there is some cost involved in that, and put your reliance on Magento and Adobe, the companies that have been in this business for quite a while, and now I shall say pretty much know what they're doing with regular updates and responsibilities. So the potential of hacks, data breaches is huge in e-commerce worlds. It happens all the time. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it will happen. So how the company responds. So the quick question is, who you're going to call? If you are stuck on Magento 1 and you have a major breach and your volunteer developers left this potential vulnerability open, who are you going to call? Right? On Magento 2, Magento is responsible. Adobe is responsible for the quickest updates and turnarounds and patching the holes and future vulnerabilities that pop up. It's a shield and a sword always. The protection, the better shield, better sword. There is always this teeter-totter and fight. So the big question is, I want to leave this with you in your mind, is who are you going to call when this happens?
Yeah, and look, it's not always even security. We saw a number of weeks ago, Authorize.net, payment gateway used by a large number of Magento merchants, changed some of their connectivity, changed over some of their security. So if you were using the old MD5, your connection was not going to succeed anymore, and you really needed to get onto the update. And so someone's got to be putting that out. In the latest Magento security patch, I believe that they patched over 30 different issues. So more than I would want to completely, as you say, rely on some folks from the street, knowing that a lot of the people that are more involved in Magento today, they are keeping up. And so, a lot of the better development teams and developers themselves are much more focused on M2.
Indeed, the preference from our clients, and we build a lot of payment extensions for banks and acquiring companies and processing companies and gateways out there. They're all into Magento 2. Very rarely they would order from us an extension or an update for Magento 1 just because it is going out. They might have a few big clients that require still an extension for Magento 1, but those are fewer and far in between. But in terms of support, yes, definitely the big payment companies, their focus and their investment goes into Magento 2 for continued support, upgrade, and patching.
Same way that there's a patch to allow you to use Magento 1 in PHP 7.2, and when it comes time to go to the next version of PHP, I don't know who's going to be, putting that out, once Magento 1 is end of life. So
it's iffy, it's unknown, it's volunteer. Yeah. So will that volunteer be there tomorrow, or will the volunteer's priorities or family life or jobs change, and that project gets abandoned? With Magento, you have a company, and now you have Adobe behind them as well, a well-renowned corporation, so with a history of development and products.
So I think the major takeaway from my side would be that 2.3.1 is accepted today, and whatever the next release will be, will be following along. That There are cases where, you know, sometimes you want to give something a little bit of a chance to be used, you know, beyond beta as a new release comes out, where you don't necessarily want to, you know, download and update the exact day that that a new release comes out. Patches often, certainly from a security standpoint, you do want to upkeep with it as fast as you can in most cases. But nonetheless, that, you know, there's a lot of benefit to going to this latest round of tech. That you don't want to get left behind in the e-commerce world, that's for sure. Whether it's for security, whether it's for other reasons that they're going to impact your sales in comparison with other stores, things like loading speed. So we do appreciate you listening in and following along with us. We'll be sharing some more information on the topic on the JetRails blog, and look forward to any questions that you have for any of us. Please feel free to reach out. Thank you very much, and we look forward to bringing you the next installment soon.
Thank you, everyone. It was good talk. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, guys.